My name is Erin Gay, and I'm the Executive Director of the Collin County Democratic Party. In this day and age, it's hard to find the real news that really speaks to us, and Progress Texas, they give you what you want, and, it's amazing to hear people like-minded in Texas, especially, that really know what we want to hear, and they deliver.
It's Wednesday, July 9th, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Latest on the July 4th flood disaster and a stark increase in the number of people who are missing. The death toll has continued to creep higher. It now stands at 111. The new news from Governor Greg Abbott's update yesterday, reported by ABC News, is that the number of missing has increased by far. 173 people are now considered missing, up from a broadly circulating estimate of only about 40 as of just yesterday on Tuesday, as counts from various agencies were consolidated and reports from families were further documented. A tragic instance of how information continues to change and coalesce in a chaotic situation. At this stage, as we know, the likelihood of finding any of these people alive is very slim. This flood's fatality count now threatens to approach 300. As bad as it seemed yesterday in terms of loss of life, it appears far worse than we had thought. 161 of these missing people are from Kerr County alone. Uplifting amidst all this tragedy, and in contrast to the atmosphere that's been established by the Trump regime and our state government's treatment of the Latino communities of Texas, the presence of a team of firefighters and first responders from Mexico who have volunteered to help north of their border in Kerr County. The Guardian says the 13 members of Fundación 9/11 are operating under the command of the Mountain Home Fire Department and Texas DPS. The U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ronald Johnson, thanked the Mexican team for their efforts on social media, saying, quote, "The United States and Mexico are united, not only as neighbors, but as family, especially in times of need," unquote. "We note that there's nothing on this welcome help in our time of need from the likes of Kristi Noem, Greg Abbott, or Donald Trump." In fact, for anyone concerned about making this political, look no further than your beloved governor, who's been using copious amounts of press conference time to heap praise upon the likes of Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, while at the same time using bad football analogies and calling folks who might dare to question the actions of the Republican elected officials who are very much running the show in the midst of hazards made possible by the policies and procedures those Republican electeds put into place, losers. In much the same fashion that Donald Trump just can't believe that the MAGA base can't just accept that the Jeffrey Epstein buddies list just magically went poof and move on. There is absolutely, undeniably, a conversation to be had about responsibility and accountability when dozens of dead now threaten to become hundreds of dead. The Quorum Report, Scott Braddock noted on Monday on his Texas Take podcast a reaction from veteran San Antonio news anchor Stefania Jimenez at KSAT in San Antonio to the almost half hour that Governor Abbott and Kristi Noem spent Saturday at the beginning of what should have been an initial and very serious update for thousands of distraught Texans, at that time still hopeful for word about survivors, instead patting each other on the back and groveling for Donald Trump. About 27 minutes. HuffPost has Jimenez saying, quote, "What I was struck by is that we really didn't get any concrete information until 27 minutes into that news conference, where you had the governor speak, you had Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem speak for a while, but you know what people are wanting is information. I don't know what it is about people who run for federal office that whenever disasters like this happen, they take it upon themselves to first list all the names of people they want to thank, not what we want to hear right now," unquote, and correct. It's a show to these people and a very deeply political opportunity. What certainly was not talked about by any of these showboating Republicans was the fact that even as FEMA personnel and gear were kicking in Kerr County, hours prior to the 4th, Donald Trump had been talking about eliminating FEMA. The AP says that tune has changed somewhat, as Trump is now similarly racking up maximum political points and touting FEMA's response in the area. Kristi Noem trying to rewrite recent history and pointing to Trump's desire to streamline FEMA, not eliminate it, as he is very much on the record in planning. Michael Cohen was the FEMA chief of staff in the Obama and Biden administrations. He wonders, quote, imagine if an event like this happened a year from now after FEMA is eliminated. What would the president or Secretary Noem offer to the governor of Texas if there is no FEMA, unquote? That agency not only helps with the major tasks of rescue and recovery, they also help individuals who now find themselves homeless and desperate. Without FEMA, those folks will be relying solely on Texas's state government to help, and that's not an operation known for moving mountains for the little guy. We'll be talking for years about what local officials did, didn't do, or why in the days before disaster struck, but the latest there, Emily Foxhall at the Texas Tribune, reminds us that 3 hours and 21 minutes elapsed from the National Weather Service's first flash flood warning to when the first flooding reports came in from low-lying water crossings. The Weather Service says that first warning triggered many of the automatic alerts to cell phones and weather radios, telling people in the area of the danger, but it remains unclear and unclarified whether any local officials in Kerr County got those warnings and whether they moved their asses in any meaningful way in that 3 hours and 21 minutes. They still won't answer questions about it. What we can confirm they did was start pointing fingers at the National Weather Service by lunchtime on Friday. Bud Kennedy at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram posted an excerpt from a CNN report that says, quote, behind the scenes, National Weather Service officials were communicating with local emergency managers in the affected region over an internal messaging platform. Typically, the media is expected to treat messages from this platform as off the record, but a NOAA official granted CNN permission to report general information about the Texas disaster from this platform. The messages show that after initial briefings on the afternoon of Thursday, July 3rd, about the potential of heavy rains to come, emergency managers from some counties in the region were posting on the system, querying forecasters about what to expect. Those messages picked up the pace as the flooding began in the early hours of July 4th. But no emergency manager from Kerr County participated in those discussions on the messaging platform. It's unclear whether officials were reviewing the information being shared, unquote. We're learning of another grim coincidence, also from the AP. It turns out that inspectors from the Texas Department of State Health Services signed off on the emergency policies of the hard-hit Camp Mystic just 2 days before this disaster. A report released yesterday shows that Camp Mystic had complied with requirements regarding procedures to be implemented in case of a large flood, instructions for campers on what to do if they need to evacuate, and assignments of specific duties to each staff member and counselor in emergency situations. However, the specifics of Camp Mystic's actual plans are not present over 5 years of these inspection reports, leaving those details also unclear at present. We refer you back to a guest blog we posted on Monday from Candace Valenzuela, Texas educator, advocate, former school board trustee, and former Biden administration appointee to HUD Southwest, who says what we're saying, and that's, quote, the government didn't do enough to protect those kids or the staff or the nearby families, not because the tools didn't exist, but because they chose not to use them. During my time under President Biden, I oversaw disaster recovery across 5 states. I saw firsthand how well some Texas communities have prepared. You don't see them in the headlines because averted disasters are harder to report on. But I also saw time and again how state and local leaders chose politics over public safety. They deprioritized rural infrastructure, rejected warning systems, and left families vulnerable even when federal disaster mitigation money was on the table, unquote. There's so much yet to learn about what state leaders and local Kerr County leaders did or didn't do to keep both their residents and the visitors who are key to that area's economy safe. I fear that picture's not going to turn out to be very pretty. Ted Cruz has stumbled into all of this, as only Ted Cruz can do, and I don't really want to talk about Ted Cruz, to be honest, but he did apparently screw up with more bad vacation travel. To be fair, Ted Cruz was already in Greece when the disaster occurred. Strange to celebrate America's Independence Day in Greece, but I digress. The issue becomes his office's claim that he rushed back to Texas, quote, as fast as humanly possible, unquote, which for a U.S. senator would mean either within the hour on a private plane or on the next flight out of a busy tourism area where commercial flights to Texas depart at a rate of over 100 takeoffs per day. Vanity Fair says Ted Cruz was spotted touring the Parthenon over 24 hours after the flood in Texas, before finally leaving Greece on Sunday morning and arriving back in Texas on Sunday night, a full 2 days after the fact. There's a lot of hay being made about this, and maybe I'm just jaded, but for now, my take is that Ted Cruz doesn't really care about his constituents, and he's also full of shit. But both of those points are well-established old news. We should also mention this morning alarming video coming from Ruidoso, New Mexico, a town where about half of the available real estate is owned by out-of-state folks, and the vast majority of those are Texans. My family around Lubbock are Ruidoso regulars. The Rio Ruidoso is literally a creek on a normal day that you can walk across in places without getting your shorts wet, but it rose 20 feet out of its banks this week in scenes of flash flooding reminiscent of what we've watched in horror in the Texas Hill Country over the last few days. 3 people have died in Ruidoso, 2 of them children. Again, lots of Texans in that town on any given weekend. Lots of great memories for me personally and for my family. At Progress Texas, we hope everyone there stays safe. Our mission at Progress Texas is to counter the conservative disinformation machine, which is funded by oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups, all while fact-based independent media outlets increasingly face threats to our funding. While access to those outlets is frequently free, as it is here at Progress Texas, it takes listener support to keep fact-based independent media going. If you've come to appreciate what we do, now more than ever, we could use your support as a monthly contributor, and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate. Thanks to Johnetta Byam, Joy Russo-Cade, and Alan Cade, and Alan Carroll, all of whom have joined the team lately. We appreciate all of y'all very much. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Wednesday, July 8th, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks for listening. Have a good day. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.